What's happening, guys? Welcome to the Whiskey Shed. My name is John McGrath and this is my new YouTube channel where I, as a relatively uninformed Irishman, take a sojourn through the world of whiskey. Now, we're in my workshop where I make my other YouTube videos for my woodworking channel, so hence the name. We're drinking whiskey, we're in a shed, the Whiskey Shed, an inspired name, I know. So welcome along. If you're new here, think about hitting that sub button because we're going to have plenty of whiskies coming up, and we'll have a bit of fun as I take a journey into this whiskey world, like I said. So now, without further ado, let's jump in and look at the whiskey today. So before we jump in to taste the whiskey, I have picked myself up a new glass, and this is the Irish whiskey glass. I believe this was released last year in 2019, I think. So not to be outdone by our Scottish cousins who have the Glencairn glass. An Irish company has set up this glass and called it, or this company, the Irish whiskey glass, and called it the Túath glass. It's slightly larger than the Glencairn. I'll do a separate video on this. And I can go through all the specs and features on it and you can see what the glass is all about. But we can fit more whiskey in our one, and we did invent whiskey, so we do need our own glass. And Túath, the word, comes from the Irish word for nation or people or folk or tribe, clan, that type of thing. And the most famous use of it is in the Túath de Dana, and that is the people of the goddess Dana, which are the original settlers, or where the Irish people are supposed to be come from. And they are like a godlike people, apparently. So we're all descended from gods, and we invented whiskey. So we're not too bad on this little island. So that's my new whiskey glass, and this is the whiskey we're going to try today, Jameson Black Barrel. So let's jump in. So a couple of little fun facts and a little bit of history on Jameson, or Jameson as we pronounce it here. Just say everything fast and it sounds like you're in Ireland. So Jameson was founded by John Jameson in 1780. He's a Scotsman, but we'll forgive him that. And they've started producing whiskey, I think, in 1805, if I have my dates correct. Now, they didn't actually bottle any whiskey themselves until 1968. That's when the first bottle of Jameson came on the market. So for all those years, Jameson whiskey was producing distillate for other people. They would take it and age it in their barrels, and then they would sell it as their whiskey. So to bonded whiskey merchants, they produced all the whiskey. And they were producing, at the height of it, I believe, 1 million gallons of whiskey a year. So they were one of the world's largest producers of whiskey. And it kind of fell on hard times. So the Bow Street Jameson distillery shut down around the early 1970s. Everything kind of got consolidated as Irish whiskey fell on hard times to the Middleton distillery in Cork. So Cork distillers, Jameson, Paddy and Powers, I believe, all got together, became Irish distillers, and now that's all produced in Middleton in Cork. So there's a couple of fun facts. Another little fun fact for you as well is the Middleton distillery in Cork, when they're aging the whiskey in all those barrels in those multiple warehouses, the angel share is about 34,000 bottles a day. So that's how many bottles of whiskey are evaporating from the barrels that are in the distillery in Middleton, 34,000 a day. So that's pretty impressive. I can only imagine how much whiskey is actually in those barrels. So enough on that, let's taste it. So before we actually taste it, I should give you a little bit of information on the whiskey itself. This is part of Jameson's kind of range where they released a bunch of bottles, all flavoured differently. And this is their black barrel. Now, this is a mix of pot still and grain whiskey. So some of the whiskey is aged in ex-bourbon or first fill bourbon barrels, some of it in Oloroso sherry barrels, and it gets its black name from the fact that they take some of those bourbon barrels and they re-char them. So they re-char all the inside of the barrels. They say it brings the barrels back to life. It caramelizes all the natural sugars that are in the wood, and they age some of it then in those re-charred barrels and then blend the three together, and that's what gives this its unique flavour and gives this Jameson whiskey its name. Now, it's 40 ABV, so 40% alcohol, which is again the minimum you can have a whiskey and still call it whiskey. And on the nose, yeah, so straight away it's vanilla. You can definitely get the fact that it was in those bourbon barrels. You can get some sherry notes. It's definitely toffee-esque, I'd say. If you know the sweets, Werther's Originals, just think of those, the smell of those, and you wouldn't be too far off the mark. It's not an overly strong whiskey. It kind of has a dark colour. I'm not sure, do they colour it, or does it get that colour from the fact that it's in the re-charred barrels? I'm not too sure on that. But yeah, so some vanilla, some toffee, caramel notes. It's not very, very strong. There's no kick of alcohol, so you don't get any the ethanol. It's nice and not overly complex on the nose, I would say, but has a lovely vanilla and toffee. So if you think vanilla and toffee, they're the two things that I'm getting out of this most. And then on the palate, yeah, that's a vanilla, toffee and caramel all day long. It's actually quite nice. It's kind of finishing, just nice caramel notes. I would say it's a sweet enough whiskey, almost what I'd say an Irish bourbon maybe, something along those lines. It's definitely an Irish whiskey, so you can definitely taste the fact that it is an Irish whiskey. It still has some of that butteriness, but it is all caramel and toffee. Like I say, it's not an overly complex whiskey. 42 euros, I believe I paid for this. I think it's readily available in the States, and you guys can get it even cheaper than we can get it here. It's in around a $30 mark, $32, $35, I believe, from what I've seen. So like I say, you guys get our whiskey over there a lot cheaper than we can get our whiskey for here. But that's just down to, I think, government taxes. But yeah, that's a nice, easy to drink whiskey. It's caramel and vanilla all day long, and it's not a bad bottle of whiskey. Very easy drink. There's no overpowering ethanol. Again, it's only 40%, so it's not a strong whiskey. It's not a very complex whiskey. The flavour does die off quite quickly, but it's, you know, it's nice and simple. Toffee, vanilla, and caramel. They're the three things I'm getting from this. Not so much the spices. They're there, but it's only a hint. Not too much of the oak, which is surprising. The fact that they're in the recharred barrels. And yeah, I'm not getting too big a hint of the oak. So let's let it sit for a while in the glass now and see if it changes. So having let it sit for a few minutes. Again, a little bit more spices. I've said it in my first few videos, when you leave a whiskey sit for a little while in the glass, it does change. It even changes in the bottle. So all this is very of the moment and subjective, I think, when you're drinking whiskey. Some of the flavours are consistent, but if you let air into the bottle, the whiskey will change. If you let air into the glass, let the whiskey sit, it changes. That's what I find. I always find the kind of bacon spices come a little bit more to the forefront with Irish whiskey. You get those lovely kind of cinnamon notes. Now, it's not very strong in this whiskey. The vanilla and the caramel is still there, and the toffee. It's essentially like a liquid Werther's original, I would say. Quite nice. Inoffensive, not very complex, so an easy drinking whiskey maybe. There you go now, a little bit more hint of the oak. Some of the spices, again, it's not overly complex. I'm not getting much more than toffee and vanilla from this, but it is nice. It's light, it's easy drink. I think if you're looking for a nice, light, easy drinking whiskey, this is it. It's relatively inexpensive at its price point, especially if you're in the States. I mean, you can get this stuff for nearly $30 a barrel, which is not too bad for a whiskey. And it is a nice whiskey. It's a blended whiskey, and it's at a certain price point, so set your expectation levels to that. It's the kind of whiskey that could get you in a lot of trouble, I think, because it is pretty easy to drink. It's you can have a few of these without knowing you're after having a few of them, and without having to think too hard about what's in the glass. Again, it's just butterscotch, toffee, Werther's Originals, and vanilla all day long. Yeah, it's not too bad. I would say a nice, easy, light toffee drinking whiskey. If you like our Jameson, I think you're going to like this one. If you like bourbon, you probably will like this one again. It's yeah, nice and sweet. Something along the lines, if you could think of an Irish bourbon, that wouldn't be too far off. There we go. Okay guys, so there we go. That has been my opinion on Jameson Black Barrel. To me, it's a nice, easy drinking whiskey. Sweet, toffee notes, vanilla all day long. So I think if you like Jameson, you would like this. This is actually a bit, to me, a little bit nicer than the standard Jameson bottles. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's very, very easy drink. It's not a very complex whiskey. And at this price point, that's actually not too bad for a nice blended whiskey. So, as always, we're going to end with a toast, and like I always say, I'm going to run out of these toasts very, very soon, so I'm going to have to pick one and maybe stick to it. But here's a fun one that I always enjoy. May you be in heaven half an hour before the devil knows you're dead. Sláinte guys, I shall see you in the next one. Take it easy. Yeah, that could get you in a lot of trouble. I could have a few more of these in this shed. I better not though, because I'm in enough trouble as it is. Take it easy guys, I'll see you in the next one.